Hello and welcome to Sutton Impact Family Style Conspiracy Edition. Yes, you heard that right. Sutton Family Conspiracy Edition. And I'm joined by.
Fred and Keaton.
And we thought about this because in recent weeks, one Jaylen Brown was not named to the Olympic team. And of course, he put out a number of tweets with the giant eye emojis and "you really gonna do me like this, Nike?" And it sparked some debate and some conversation. And Keaton, why don't you let's hear your thoughts on Jaylen Brown not making the Olympic team? Conspiracy or just Twitter beef? Or whatever it would be.
I think through everything, I think this one's just Twitter beef.
Oh.
He wasn't on the original roster. We didn't get any tweets from him. Derek White replaces Kawhi, and then he sends out the tweets, the three guys looking through the monocle, the "I'm not afraid of you or your resources" tweet to nobody. And then he had to come out after and say that it wasn't targeted to Derek White because that's his guy.
Yeah.
But I just think that Grant Hill made a good point, and him answering questions after saying there's only 12 spots. It's the answer that he has to give, but I think it's legitimate. You look at the wings that he was already going to be behind, that Brown would have already been behind on the roster. He would have been behind Tatum, LeBron, and even though he's probably a better player than LeBron at this point, you can't not have LeBron on that roster. KD, Ant Edwards, you probably still count Drew Holiday as a wing at this point. And for his defense, he's probably going to be playing more. If you count Booker as a wing, you're probably playing him more than Brown. So I just don't know that Brown was a great fit for the team to begin with.
Well, so Your Honor, then where would
you lose a guy like Kawhi?
But where would Kawhi? Kawhi would be the big wing. Was he behind all those guys in this mythical team that Grant Hill made up?
I think so because he's not healthy. I would be shocked if he came into the tournament, the Olympics, and was fully healthy. So I think going into it, it was kind of a pipe dream that Kawhi was going to even be able to contribute to the team. And then him ultimately, agreeing to part ways or leave the team is kind of proof of that, I think. But I just don't know that Brown was going to fit on the team in terms of getting good minutes. And he's a $300 million man now. So I don't know that he would have bought into being a guy off the, not really playing deep in the bench, where I think a guy like White is a perfect fit for that role. He's probably not going to see a ton of time, but you need a guy who can defend a little bit, guy who can handle the ball, guy who can spot up, shoot. He can do a little bit of everything. And I just don't know that Hill or Team USA thought that Brown was that guy. And then I just don't know. I don't think that it's all just behind the scenes stuff, but Brown seems to think so from his tweets. I'm interested in what you guys think.
Well, if I could be Jaylen Brown's attorney for a minute, I would say first, Eastern Conference MVP, Finals MVP, clearly the greatest player in Celtics history, best player on the Celtics right now. And there's somehow 3 other Celtics that aren't Jaylen Brown on this Olympic team? That seems weird. In the past, Jaylen Brown covered up Nike logos. And in a very public beef that Kyrie had with Nike, that was part of him covering it up, and he had Kyrie's back. Nike is the financial backer of all the Olympics, and especially men's basketball team. So I think it did play some role. I'm 100% conspiracy on this one.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair. I really, find this one really, really difficult because, if you're taking Grant Hill for what he said, but like Keaton said, he's got to say that in terms of just trying to make the best team we possibly can. You want to believe him just because I think Grant Hill's earned that right, that kind of level of credibility. But at the same time, to your point, Jay, if you're going to, if Kawhi was the guy who could fit that slot before, then a better version of Kawhi, quite honestly, you could make the claim that Jaylen Brown's a better version because he's fully healthy, whereas Kawhi, at maybe 80%, if that's what he's at. But so it's a really tough one for me, but I do know that there's been a couple times where Jaylen Brown hasn't necessarily helped the narrative of things because he's quick to kind of throw those cryptic responses down in Twitter. You're always just like, what is going on? Like every time that there's any kind of like trade rumor that involves him, you're going to get 2 or 3 crazy tweets. So it's hard to ignore that part of it, and I need to ignore that part of it. But I would not be at all surprised if Nike had something to do with this. But my opinion is that it has more to do with actually individual players. Like, I could see LeBron going to Grant Hill and being like, hey, listen, it's not a dude I want to have on the team.
Oh, I could see that for sure. Now, do you think Tatum is one of those dudes? Now, you Boston people, do you think Tatum would have said that behind the scenes? Like, let me have my moment without Jaylen Brown. Let us not be tied together for yet another thing. Do you think Tatum would be that behind the scenes?
I don't, but I could see somebody making that argument because of all the attention that Jaylen Brown got during the finals and the conference finals and the NBA finals and getting the MVP of both. When they flashed over to Tatum in the moment, you could kind of see a sense of disappointment. But that was quickly replaced by him just being happy. Those two dudes have been through so much together. I think that they're brothers. I think that they're really tight. So I do not in any way envision that Tatum would have been one of the people that would have been driving that narrative.
Okay. And then I guess the last question on this one is, Olympics are over. Start of the NBA training camps. Derek White, Drew Holiday, who's really not part of this, even though he's a Celtic. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, everybody's back at camp. Is everybody cool?
Yeah, I think so. I think everybody's coming off of the championship, and I honestly think when they're going to be so bought into the next season, I don't think it would be too hard to move on from the summer. All of that pending Jaylen Brown. I mean, if he comes back and he's, butthurt about it, then yeah, it's going to be a problem. But if he comes back and he's the one who says, guys, great run, however they did, let's get it. I think everybody's just going to be excited to try to go defend the championship, hopefully.
I would think Brown would he seems like a guy who he doesn't seem to be somebody who holds his grudge against people who he doesn't think are at fault.
Okay.
I could very much see the first day that they get back together, even before they get back together. But either way, I could definitely see him reaching out to those 3 dudes and being like, "Hey, I got nothing against you guys. My issues with Nike, or my issues with Grant Hill, or my issues with USA Basketball." I could see him doing that, so it wouldn't necessarily. I feel like it's not going to impact the team, the Celtics team.
Okay. And this is sort of a random question, again, for 2 Celtics fans, but I'm giving you even odds, right? You win a ton of money. 3 years from now, Jaylen Brown is on the Celtics, and the Celtics have won another championship, or Jaylen Brown has been traded, and the Celtics have won no championships.
If I'm picking those 2, I'm picking the second one because, one, the last 6 or I think now 7 years, there's been a different champion in the NBA. And with the rules that they're putting in place to really make it really difficult for teams to maintain, a couple dudes that are making high money.
Yeah.
I think, especially I think it's 2028, they are going to have to do some pretty crazy things. And the decision in terms of hey, do we keep Tatum and Brown and then surround them with dudes who are making $43 collectively? Or do you see if you can find a suitor for one of those guys and then be able to bring up some of the talent for the rest of your team? Because once Porzingis goes, you're finding a guy like Luke Cornett or somebody like that to replace him.
Yeah.
Or somebody who's willing to come in and take a veteran minimum deal. And wants to try and run for a championship. Then you're talking Drew Holiday will be up shortly after that. And then those extensions kick in, starting not this coming year, but next year. So there's just a lot of factors that I think that if I'm choosing those two, the second one is the one that's most likely. What about you, Keaton?
I think that in 3 years, Brown will be on the team. I could see them moving on from Porzingis, and then either Holiday or White over the not this season, but probably in the next summer. But I just find it hard to believe, and part of it as a Celtics fan, but part of it as a basketball fan, that the Celtics would commit to paying those, Tatum and Brown such gaudy numbers with no plan, with the upcoming, apron and salary cap situation. I think that my gut tells me that their plan is to somehow, like you're saying, build their team around two guys and trust that, hey, with the way the league is going to look over the next few years, assuming they're going to be expanding in the next few years, and it's just going to be harder to pay stars, that most of these teams are going to be building around one star, and we're going to get back. I think the league wants to get back to instead of when you need 3 stars to win, you can win with 1 star, and just, because you can only pay 1 star. I think the Celtics are trying to find a way to pay those 2 guys and be one of the few teams that has 2 superstars, and then, like you're saying, fill in the guys around. Hopefully hit on a couple of draft picks. Hopefully find some guys, some veterans who want to play for a little bit less money but compete for a championship. Especially Boston doesn't have that draw to free agents like LA or Miami does in the sense of location.
Yeah.
But in terms of pedigree and just a team that wants to win, it's hard to beat Boston. So I could see, I think that he'll be on the team in 3 years. I think that both him and Tatum will be on the team in 3 years, and that hopefully they're still the building blocks of those guys, of that organization.
Okay. We have 5 conspiracies we're talking about tonight, and oddly enough, my 2 both involve one person, and your 2 both involve one person, somewhat, right?
Well, yeah, a couple of the same players in mine
Yeah.
too, but yeah.
I'll do one. We'll bounce back and forth. I'll do probably the smallest one first, because I don't think we have a lot of evidence. But when Patrick Ewing, Georgetown great, was coming out of the draft, the New York Knicks were down. Major NBA market. Some of the ratings were suffering. The Knicks were not the odds-on favorite to win the lottery. And yet the Knicks won and got Patrick Ewing and brought Knicks basketball back to, I want to say greatness, but they never won a chip, so relevancy. And the theory, or the conspiracy is that the Knicks envelope, because it was a giant thing of envelopes, and he just pulled them out and then opened it up, and that was the team, is that the Knicks envelope was kept in the freezer overnight, so that when David Stern reached in, he would feel the cold envelope, much like a magician does on stage, and then pull out the Knicks, and that's how they would get it. He's the commissioner. He's about revenue. He understands large markets, the importance of a Knicks franchise. He's a former lawyer, so he understands not having morals and a sense of right and wrong necessarily. And at the very least, is probably very good at circumventing it and could argue his way to saying what is best for the league, what is best for Patrick, what is best for this world is Patrick Ewing as a New York Knick. So I'm actually doing the right thing by cheating, which sounds like a very lawyer thing to do. But there's really no evidence. But it is a fun conspiracy. But I have no evidence one way or the other. It's just one of those things that someone said happened. But like I said, I know that that's a common thing magicians do, where you either, rub sandpaper on a card, or you freeze the card. You do something to make the card distinct that the audience can't see. Do you guys buy that there's anything, or they've just Knicks won the lottery and that was just it?
Yeah, I've never bought into that stuff. And because unlike the NFL, where it's going to be simply based on your record,
right?
There's no argument. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. There's no, you can't dispute that. You can dispute whether or not a team's trying to win, or not. But at the end of the day, there's no argument about who's getting what pick. So unless you go to that kind of model, there's always going to be people who are going to say, like, there's probably some ulterior motive. And I get the sense that there's, right? I get the notion that, like, hey, listen, if Knicks basketball is relevant, it's better for all the league. But there's no way you're going to tell me that 29 other owners are going to be like, hey, listen, I'm going to give up my chance. Now maybe a couple would because they felt good about their teams and where they were. But you're not going to get a majority of owners to be like, hey, yeah, that's a good idea. We're just going to let James Dolan in the net. Or I don't know, even know if Nolan was the owner at the time, or Dolan was the owner at the time.
I think old Dolan was, yeah.
We're just going to let the Knicks get back to relevancy as quickly as possible and knock our team out of the playoffs. Like, in those situations, I just find it so, so off the wall that these other, owners, wealthy owners, are just going to give up on things. Now, I get, like, in some leagues, like for the MLS, right? All the teams chipped in to Miami to say, like, okay, if you can bring Messi in, we'll help pay for it because all of our ticket sales are going up.
Right.
So, like, in a situation like that where we're talking about, like, best in the world kind of thing that's going to, like, legitimately, like, change the sense of this league worldwide, okay. But even in that case, everybody was on board and it was an open conversation. It wasn't this hidden, like, secret thing.
Well, I think this conspiracy would be like a unilateral David Stern decision. But then again, he couldn't have pulled it off all by himself. And we're now, almost 40 years past. And it would be hard to imagine that, he couldn't have done it all by himself, which means someone would have had to have helped. And,
Right.
We'd either have a bunch of conspicuous deaths in New York City directly after that, or somebody would have talked by now in a bar to a loved one on their deathbed. Like, somebody would have been like, yeah, I helped the Knicks cheat.
Yeah. And my last thing is, like, it's just not worth it. Yes, it's tempting. It sounds great. But at the end of the day, if the commissioner or some group of people did do that, and it was found out in some way, shape, or form, it would rock the entire league. And
Yeah. It's true. It is true. Like I said, I'm a big Knicks fan, so that one was fun for me. And then it led into that, the second one. This is a mini one I'll just do. But there was another conspiracy that when LeBron made the decision, the NBA rigged the league so that the Cleveland Cavaliers would get the first pick, which I also don't think is true. But the next one I do believe, which I'll get to after you do one.
All right. First one I got is Deflategate. So, as just to quickly kind of anybody who might not know some of the specific details, 2014, Patriots are playing the Colts in the playoffs, and player for the Colts intercepts a pass from Brady. He gets over to the sidelines. He's not necessarily thinking anything of it, but somebody else from the team checks out the ball. Feels like it's underinflated. It's kind of flat. They report that to the league. At halftime, the balls are all tested. It's found that 5 of the 11 footballs are under 11 PSI. They're supposed to be at a minimum 12.5. So they then just say, like, okay, we're just going to pump the balls up. They fix the problem. Rest of the game goes on. And then the whole world comes to an end from an NFL standpoint. Basically accusing Brady of being a cheater, knowing that was illegal, and having directed the team to do something that was illegal, which is a huge hot button item because they've been in trouble with illegal things before. I'll tell you straight out, I think it's kind of an open and shut. There's really no conspiracy from that standpoint. I think, as a Patriots fan, I'm going to tell you, it happened. And I think that Brady told them, hey, listen, 12.5 PSI, it needs to be there or less. That's what I want, right? And so they probably put it at 12.5. They go out in the game. It's a really cold night. The air in the ball contracts a little bit, and the PSI goes down even more. But the reason why I don't think it's really that big of a deal is because it was 17-7 at halftime. Second half, the Patriots outscored them 28-9.
Yeah.
So with the balls that had been reinflated, it didn't seem to really have any negative effect on Brady's performance. In fact, actually made him better. And then they had some success. The next year, they were successful. Then he gets suspended, and then they go on to the Super Bowl, and he wins, and Brady wins Super Bowl MVP. At no point in time in like the good 6 or 7 years after Deflategate did Brady seem to have any problem performing on the field. So,
yeah.
Personally, what about you, Keaton?
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I don't think that it's really a conspiracy theory. I think that he wanted the footballs at the lowest PSI. Like you said, you spelled it out pretty nicely. Do we know that the Patriots are an organization that are known for, squeezing every advantage out of, any possible one that there is? Yes. And I think any good competitor would be doing that. But they got caught, and I think that's why you didn't hear guys like Brady and Belichick coming out straight out saying that they didn't do that.
Yeah. Now, I have to agree on some of it because, as a non-Patriot fan, much like the rest of the NFL, we hated the Patriots and Belichick. I called him Belichick, and it was a fantastic little run, but they kept winning, so it made us all shut up, which was annoying. But, yeah, Brady's the greatest football player of all time, the greatest quarterback of all time, and, whether there was a cell phone telling people to deflate balls, it doesn't really matter. I do take one issue, and this is not the conspiracy part, though, and maybe this is a little bit corny, but I don't think if you know that it's shouldn't be allowed in the rules, but it's just a technicality and you use it, I don't think that's competitive. I think that's a shitty person. And I think that's part of the problem with our country and the world we live in. And that's my soapbox stand, why I should be president.
No, but I think you're right. I think, because it's always tough to know. You could have, or I'll put it this way. I could have a notion in my brain that says, like, okay, this is as close as we can get to the edge and still be within the rules. And if I tell you to do something in that kind of like, in the notion, and my point being that, like, if Belichick, I personally think that it was Belichick that would have led this because the Patriots were always talked about as never fumbling the ball. It'd be a lot easier not to fumble the ball when the ball was deflated. So I personally think that this was kind of like, this was definitely something, whether it was Brady or Belichick, I would lean towards Belichick, not to protect Brady, just in terms of it was having a positive impact on the entire team because they were securing the ball. But if I know going in, I'm like, hey, listen, we can do this. We just have to stay at this 12.5. We can't go any lower than that, but that's where I want it to be. And other people don't understand, and the people that I'm leaning on to execute the plan don't understand that we have to be right there, then things can get off, right? Which, to your point, Jason, whether that was my intent or not, if I know that we're that close and I'm not double checking to make sure we're staying there, then, I'm definitely part of the problem.
And I know from I was taught things by a certain current NBA coach, former NBA player at pretty nice basketball camp, where, different ways of holding jerseys and doing things that were basically cheating. And he said, it's not your job, it's the referee's job to see it, not your job not to do it. And he's obviously a very successful person. I never liked that. I've always had I know that sounds like the goody-goody, and I've done plenty of bad things in my life. I'm not saying I have. I'm just saying, I don't like that notion of, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. Being taught by NBA players how to cheat, and it's just, I don't like it.
Yeah, that sounds like an interesting camp.
Yeah, it was. But it was just like little things, like, when you're boxing out, if somebody's got position on you, you can grab their jersey, where you can step on their shoe, like just little veteran tricks is what they would call them. But it's like, and I know it happens, and that's just that's the world we live in, right? But I don't like it. I can't help it.
And you said former player, current NBA coach?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I'm just trying to figure it out. Okay, got it.
Yeah. And again, it wasn't just him. He was, he was there, and he helped me with some of the drills, but there were other players and people there as well. So, but it was just, little things of like, you're getting beat out this way. This is the way you can sort of negate some of the other person's better athleticism or height or things like that. And it's just sort of like, I don't really like this. This feels wrong. Effective, but wrong. I'll go to another one. My last one is another NBA one that we have absolutely no proof of whatsoever, and we still have not heard a word of it yet, but there's still time. But the Bulls were coming off a three-peat. The arguably greatest player in the world, best shoes, Michael Jordan, abruptly retires and goes and plays baseball at 6'8", terrible swing. In minor league baseball at that. We're talking about somebody who was in commercials, biggest star in the world, his own shoe deal. They could go for 4 in a row in the NBA, and he abruptly gets up and walks away and plays minor league baseball. Didn't play baseball in college, hadn't played baseball in forever. If you look at videos of this person, Michael Jordan, playing baseball, he's not good. He's Bronny James level baseball player.
Oh, that's low. That's just low.
All right, Bronny is probably a better basketball player than Michael Jordan was a baseball player. But the theory is that Michael Jordan, who's a notorious gambler, goes to Vegas all the time. He and Dennis Rodman would be in Vegas the night before games, not betting on basketball, mind you, but gambling. Michael Jordan apparently every card game would be betting on. He would bet you, how many tiles there were in your kitchen. Like, that's the level of stories you hear from Charles Barkley and people like that about Michael Jordan. And the conspiracy is that this was all bubbling on the surface, and David Stern asked him to step away from the game so that none of this tainted his legacy. And then he obviously returned a year later. So it was like a secret 1-year suspension for gambling. Now, again, you would assume this would involve multiple people and not just Jordan and David Stern by themselves. So, and again, we're talking over 30 years at this point. So the odds that no one has talked or none of the evidence came out is pretty low, but it's interesting, right? Because again, it's not like...
Interesting, but I do think we're in such an era of podcasts and media and just, like you said, people love their 15 seconds. And I just think that somebody would have talked. If somebody had information on Jordan, you would think that somebody would have cashed in on that by now. Now, maybe.
Scottie Pippen for sure.
Literally every basis, but I just find that I find it hard to believe that someone hasn't talked yet.
Yeah, I would assume Scottie Pippen would talk. LeBron James would talk. Almost everybody on the Chicago Bulls documentary from COVID era lockdown would talk. Muggsy Bogues would talk if he knew somehow. Yeah.
Isaiah Thomas would have said something by now.
Yeah. But again, it's one of those things where it's like, it's not like a three-peat was the first time a three-peat had ever been done. You already had, Bill Russell, who had 11 championships. Magic had more championships. So him stepping away after 3 wasn't like, I have done the NBA. Like, he was still behind a lot. He hadn't run scoring records. He wasn't on any, it was a weird time to step away. Now, I know they said his father, I think that's his father had passed away at that time too. And yes, it maybe was some sort of, and it was sort of like more of an emotional crisis, and, I don't know. It's an interesting one though. Like because I feel like he's never really given a specific, like why he just was like, no, I'm out. And then he came back and they repeated again. So.
Yeah. No, I can definitely I could fathom. I find it believable. Stern going to dinner with Michael Jordan one night, just the two of them, and him being like, look it, this is the deal, Michael. Like, this is what I'm hearing. This is all the stuff that's going on. Like, and then that's where they come up with the idea of, like, this, like, 1 year, quote unquote, suspension, or 2 year, quote unquote, suspension. But still, even if that was the case, there would still be people that would be reporting to Stern about all this gambling stuff. There still would have been all these people that would have been bringing this to Stern, like, hey, listen, this might be a suspension. Like, you might have to do it. People would have known. And to Keaton's point, somebody would have blabbed by now, certainly. With all the money that they would have gotten, there's definitely someone who would have written a book. Now that David Stern is dead, rest in peace. But, like, that would have come out. I personally, and you touched on it, I think, honestly, like, his father dying and all the reports that you hear about him in terms of, like, he just attacked every game, every practice. It was just intense. I don't care what level of athlete you are. You do that for 3, 4, 5 years straight, you need a break. It doesn't matter how competitive you are. It doesn't matter what you're doing. Like, playing, once you include the playoffs, playing over 100 games a year with that kind of intensity, on top of the fact that his father not only being killed but murdered, shot randomly, like, on the side of the road. Like, I could see somebody just getting to a point where they're like, okay, looking for something else.
And not to bring a pun up to Deflategate, but I think what really deflates this conspiracy is this past, like, 6 months ago, when that guy had gone back and combed through Jordan's stats and said that his stats were padded on his home Bulls games as far as his defensive numbers. Like, if people are combing through, old seasons of Bulls games showing that he had 15 less assists and 9 less steals, they probably would have found something else.
Yeah, because it certainly seems like there's people who are trying, right? Like,
yeah,
the people who absolutely love LeBron, it's gotten to that point of, like, okay, we love him so much, we're going to, like, prove that Michael Jordan is just horrible. Like, it's become unreasonable with some of these arguments where, there's extremists in everything.
Yeah.
Including, like, sports, arguments.
I will say, though, for the other side of the argument, if anybody was going to be allowed to get away with that, it would have been Michael Jordan, especially in the Stern era.
Oh,
because there are videos of referees being mic'd up where no foul was called, and Michael Jordan goes up to him and asks for a foul call. And I remember this one specifically where the referee, I don't know his name, but the referee's like, I believe you, Michael, I believe you, and then calls a foul. And Stern, nothing's ever been proven, but I don't know that he's necessarily ever been, like, the most trustworthy guy. So you could absolutely tell me that him, in the best interest of the league, not wanting that to get out, trying to save money, telling Michael, take your year, I'll do my due diligence in suspending you, won't tell anyone, you still get paid to play a sport, come back when you want, or come back next year, and, wipe the hands clean, we're good to go, and, in our records, you've served your suspension. I could see something like that just to protect somebody the level of Michael, and I could see Stern deciding that that's more important than, being true to the fact that maybe he was gambling on games.
Because he played for the White Sox, right? The White Sox minor league team?
Yeah, the Birmingham, was it?
And isn't that team owned by the same guy who owns the Chicago Bulls?
It is. And of course, Jordan has Nike money behind him as well. So, to recap, we've had David Stern, Bill Belichick, and Nike involved in all these conspiracies so far, on some level. So, maybe there is something to those three people connected.
Hey, listen, Belichick gets himself in enough trouble. He doesn't need to be blamed for, like, the Michael Jordan, suspension thing.
Well, I thought they could have called, Nike could have called Belichick and been like, look, we need a plan. And Belichick's like, listen, it's going to sound a little nutty. He's going to go play baseball for a year.
All right. Speaking of Belichick, so I'm gonna throw out, obviously, one of the biggest things that's happened in sports for some time is Spygate. So, from a recap standpoint, 2007, first game of the regular season, Patriots versus the Jets. Coach of the Jets is now Eric Mangini, who was a longtime assistant for the Patriots, knew all the stuff that they would used to do. And one of the things that they always did was they had some guy on the sidelines who was videotaping the defensive coaches as they flashed in all the defensive signals. Yes, back then, you actually had a dude on the sidelines who did all the hand signals and everything like that to let people know what defense they were going to run. And so the Patriots had somebody who was videotaping that. And then after the game, they had somebody break it down, look at it, and be like, okay, they did hands up in the air twice, and then they ran man. And they did hands up in the air twice again, and then ran man again. Okay, that's probably the signal for man. So they used that to break down what the signals were. Mangini was not having it. He was frustrated that they were doing that. There was a memo that had come out from the league that said, like, you can't do this anymore. Mangini saw the guy who was doing it. He told the officials. The officials made a big deal out of it and let the league know. And then it became known as Spygate. It then also morphed into, this must be the reason the Patriots were able to beat the St. Louis Rams in the Super Bowl in 2001, and how much other stuff have they been dishonest about and cheated through all these years. So, conspiracy or not, there's an element to this that is conspiracy, I will say that straight out. And I will get to what portion of it is.
Okay.
But the overall genesis of it is not conspiracy, because Belichick was very open about the fact, like, we got this guy, he's in Patriots gear, he stands on the sidelines, and he videotapes the defensive, to the point where, like, some of the defensive coordinators would wave at the camera and, like, joking, like, people knew about it. Not because it was just the Patriots,
right,
but because a number of teams did that. There were several coaches that came out and said, like, we were doing that. I know a bunch of other teams that did that. Jimmy Johnson got on, like, the Fox pre-show and said, like, I know a bunch of people are doing it. Kansas City Chiefs have been doing it for 15 years. Like, those were the things that were being said by, like, coaches on national air. So, additionally, like, Belichick was very open about the fact, hey, I've been doing this since I got here in 2020, or since I got here in 2000. Here's all the tapes. The only thing that I don't do is we don't take the information during the game, because the rule says you can't use it during the game that it's being.
Yeah.
So, so I don't necessarily think that there was also some evidence that disproved. There was a big report that came out about the whole shortly after the 2007 initial issue with the Jets. There was a big, huge investigative report that came out that suggested that the Patriots had also done, like, videotaping of the St. Louis Rams walkthrough before the Super Bowl. That was later proven to be incorrect. So there's a lot of things that have been kind of, like, debunked in this whole situation. But where there is a conspiracy that has never been answered is Goodell gets involved in this. He says, hey, listen, I need you to send me all the tapes that you guys have. Belichick says, no, I'm not going to do that. So then Goodell sends somebody up to Foxborough to come and get the tapes, but they destroyed them all.
Mm-hmm.
For reasons that nobody's ever been able to really explain. So the piece there is that some people are saying that Goodell did that because Robert Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, had a heavy hand in him being named as commissioner. So that this was kind of like a, hey, do you a solid kind of thing since you helped me out?
Yeah.
That's really the only explanation, because it makes no sense. Why would you destroy that evidence? So that part, I feel like, is a conspiracy, that element of it. But I think in general, it's been something that's just been blown up over the years. And as a Patriots fan, it's been frustrating, because it's something that a lot of people have used to try to tear down the success that the Patriots had. But I will mention the fact that after Spygate, the Patriots did win 3 more Super Bowls.
It's true. And
So they still had some things right. And granted, Tom Brady was a big part of that. But the last Super Bowl the Patriots won, it was 13-3. They did not win because of offense.
no.
So those are my 2 cents on that. What do you think, Keaton, as somebody who's kind of grown up with all of this?
Well, I think you said it well. As a person who roots for one of these teams who has a few of these things against them, you kind of just want to know. I'd like to just know at this point, because it is like you said, most of it kind of seems like nothing, but what happened to the tapes is a big question mark. It's really hard for me to sit here and say that I don't think something sketchy happened there. And we know that Kraft is really involved with the league, always has been. I'd love to sit here and say that he didn't do anything, but it's hard to know. This one's tough.
See, this one's a good one to end on. But I will do something.
Non-Patriots fans such as yourself, what are
Well,
your thoughts?
the first thing I have to do is I have to defend the Patriots' win against the Rams. I don't know if they taped it or not, but the Rams seem to have forgotten that they had Marshall Faulk on that team for the entire Super Bowl. I remember watching that game, and he was open in the flat numerous times, and they didn't give him the ball, and they weren't handing the ball off to him, and they were trying to do something else. I don't know what they were doing. It was bad coaching. So I don't think the tapes would have helped Belichick, because the Rams were idiots in that game. So I give them that Super Bowl without any hesitation, even if they had tapes of their practice, because what they were doing was moronic. I was very frustrated in that game because I didn't want the Patriots to win.
Oh, fair, yeah.
Yeah, and as you pointed out, and this was more, as you were saying it, I got more of it. Like, I don't know what would have been on the tapes that it would have been controversial for the most part. Unless, like I said, if there was a couple practices where they filmed the other team practicing, at their facility somehow with an actual spy, not the sideline spy, but they had a guy in a Rams coat at the Rams stadium filming. Yeah. I don't know what else would have been on those tapes outside of non-football stuff that would have been, because Belichick said, I've been doing it since 2000. The Chiefs have been doing it. Everybody's been doing it. It sort of reminded me a little bit of another team that everybody hates, but it's like the Astros were better at the stupid kind of cheating that everybody was cheating at, and that goes back to my why I hate cheating point. But it's like they weren't mad that the Astros were stealing signs. They were doing it with better technology and just doing a better job than all the other teams doing it. And it seems like everybody was doing the spy-gating kind of stuff, and the Patriots were just better at it than everybody else, which makes it sort of irrelevant. But I mean, the destroying of the tapes, like you said, that's the one where it's like, of all the ones we've discussed, it's like, there's real conspiratorial evidence now, because what was on those tapes?
True, because that could have basically answered everything, right? Like, if you pull up the tapes and it's just 3 hours of some defensive coordinator doing signs, then the argument that this is what we've been using it for, you're feeling like it's legit. Whether you think that that's right or wrong, you at least know that that's what's on them.
Yeah.
So I think that would have been more supportive. One thing I did find that was interesting when I was digging into this a little bit more, just to kind of refresh my mind, the year after all this got closed up, Belichick and Kraft both presented to the owners at the owners' meetings that they do, and just talked about the situation in full, apparently, even to the point where some of the other owners had made comments about they thought it was just a class move. So again, I go back to that notion that I brought up with the next thing. You got 31 other owners, all super rich, all have a lot on the line, invested a ton into these teams. They're not going to be sitting around being like, yeah, okay, that sounds all right with me. If it's not if there's not some reason to fully believe that. So,
what about, did you guys watch The Office? I know Keaton's a little bit, What if there was a Bill Belichick threat level midnight type movie that the Patriots had made that was just awful, that, you know, made Tom Brady look very wooden and stiff in his acting and unfunny, and they just didn't want that out. And that's why they destroyed the tapes.
I would believe it.
Because that's the best I can come up with. I mean, just something embarrassing along those lines. Because like I said, it sounds like everything they said they did was already on, you know, like you said, hours and hours of people. Because even if it was a couple of sneaky tapes of other, you would destroy those tapes and just send, you know, the other 80% that are just 3 hours of a defensive coordinator putting his hands up.
Right.
Because that's easy enough to do.
Yeah, and I would say too, I think that they have to know that whatever's in those tapes is bad, because they know that by just saying that they destroyed them, whether they did or didn't, is just opening up the Pandora's box for the public to just make up these theories and everything. So they know people are going to come out and say, "Oh, it must be something worse than videotaping," you know, the signals like that or whatever that may be. But for them to just allow that to be out in the air and not ever, you know, debunk that, and for that to be better than whatever was on the tapes is really interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's funny too, because like the one thing about Spygate that's different than a lot of these other things that we're talking about is there was one like assistant or guy who was like the one that was like taking the videotapes, right?
Yeah.
And so Matt Walsh, I think his name was, and he got a lot of attention, and like there was a thing where he like, "Hey, I won't talk unless you give me anonymity or immunity or whatever it is," and all. It had very much like this kind of like big deal feel. But then each person and group that he met with, like he met with Goodell, he met with Arlen Specter, who is like, you know, a big deal politician from Pennsylvania. He met with like a couple people, I believe, like ESPN or other reporters. Everybody that he met with, they're like, "Oh, okay, this guy doesn't really have anything." Like, so the one big like witness who was going to bring the whole Patriots organization down, like everybody that talked to him was kind of like, yeah, we got nothing. So I don't know. You know, again, I don't want to feel like I'm just looking at everything through rose-colored glasses because these are teams that, you know, a team I root for. I would be quick to say like, hey, listen, if our team or our fans or something like that did something that is unacceptable, then I'd be one of the first people to say like, that's just ridiculous. I can't believe that a team I rooted for did that. But like, I really think in this situation that it was something that was blown out of proportion.
Yes, and as the non-Patriot fan here, even though I think there was some shenanigans, I still think they would have won as many Super Bowls as they won. They were just a really good team, and they had the best player in football. You know, like, you know, it's sour grapes if you want to take anything away. And and then Tom Brady went and won another Super Bowl with another team at 50 years old, or however old he was. Yeah, and the worst thing I can say is he's terrible in those car commercials. I mean, that's about all you can say about him.
Yeah, he's never been great with the commercials, even from the first one. Although, what I do think that is pretty awesome is the first commercial he did Up This Way, he refused to do any commercials until he could get his offensive linemen in the commercial as well.
Yeah.
That was always pretty cool.
It was. And I don't know what he's doing to his face, but he should stop. He's going to become a New York housewife. It's
bad. It's bad. Like, what are you doing, man? Like, I guess when somebody had something like really, really good, right?
Yeah.
They can't lose it. I don't know. So those are some bad, questionable decisions at best.
Well, for him, I mean, in the bad for women, good for men thing, like, men are supposed to age gracefully, and they get the salt and pepper. They become like the Indiana Jones sexy professor look. That's the one you want to look for. Like, you don't want to try to maintain your weird Tom Brady odd doll look, like your Geppetto or Pokey.
I know, it's not working for him, man.
No.
Just let it go. More avocados, maybe? I don't know. But, like, to your point, what he's doing now, you need to put the end to that.
Yeah, because again, you put a little salt and pepper, give him a little 5 o'clock shadow, Tom Brady's going to be, like, he's going to get even more handsome somehow. but not this. Yeah, this is bad. So I guess that pretty much wraps up our conspiracy, sadly. We didn't really have, I guess, any we could prove. Yeah.
No, it's all folklore, man. It's all folklore. Like, just the only difference is that nowadays there's so much coverage on everything. It's just people get to levels of minutia that would have never ever been like checked into before. And it's almost better when it was just like a story that people only knew a little bit about.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess the last thing would be congratulations to Bronny James on winning the Call of Duty tournament. That was pretty cool, man. It's a win for you.
Hey, he can shoot!
Yeah. Yeah. That's about it. I think it was like over an hour too. So we'll be back next week with a very interesting, either we're doing fantasy football next week or a surprise podcast that'll be really fun. That we kind of started playing with before we got on the air. Do you guys have any other closing thoughts on anything?
No, once again, thank you for having us. It's just a blast, and fun to talk about that stuff. And hopefully, I was able to at least enlighten somebody who has forever hated the Patriots because thinks they're a bunch of cheaters. Maybe somebody's at least willing to kind of look. Maybe, even if it's just one person.
You might have got one. Yeah. All right. Talk to you next week.